You mean to tell me that Dale Earnhardt won't be calling this weekend's races? Well, he's got, Dale Earnhardt Jr. That was scary. It brought back a lot of memories, not only of the Daytona 500 in 2001, but Alan Kulwicki in 92, losing his life in a helicopter crash here around Bristol. So thankfully, Dale Earnhardt Jr. is safe, and the races will continue, but after he's had a chance to sort of calm his nerves after a plane crash in Elizabethton. I was just in Elizabethton not long ago. I was making a trip and I wanted to rent a car, and it turned out that they've got a rent-a-car place there in the small Bristol airport. Yeah, let's use this one here. You're going on a trip, have a car that gets 13 miles to the gallon. You're saying, okay, what's the economy car going to be? Well, actually, okay, we'll save money if we just spend the $20. They'll go that way, because we'll be saving X amount of gallons of gas. Hello, this is Marky Billson, your voice of choice for a new generation of Tri-City sports fans. The name of the program is Tri-City Sports Now, and we own the Tri-Cities on 1420 WEMB Sports Radio, or listen to us on jetbroadcasting.live. There's also this Facebook page, which just happens to be, I think this morning I said we were 4 followers shy of 2,000. Most followed, most liked Facebook page in the market in the Tri-Cities. What do you think about that? And one of the reasons why I think is that we do have some pretty knowledgeable guests. National NASCAR writer, NBCSports.com's Jerry Bonkowski, also SiriusXM. He joins me at 1. We're going to be talking about the Bass Pro Shops NRA 500. Normally we don't give those, I say normally, it's not anything I have a phobia about, but it just seems like the sponsors come, they go, and, put it this way. There's not the identity of Bristol. Even though Bristol, the track's in Tennessee, but half of it's in Virginia, right? There's not the identity of Bristol with Bass Pro Shops NRA 500. I've been to the Bass Pro Shops in Harlingen, Texas. It's one of the nicer places to eat in Harlingen, okay? But, so they've got them all over. There's nothing distinctly Bristol about that. Volunteer 500. Now, I know you could say, well, that could be in any state in Tennessee or something. But it's in Bristol, Tennessee. And you know what side of the border the track is going to be on. And that's what it was called years ago. And I wonder if it would give you more identity if they did that. I always thought, I remember Darlington. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that NRA sponsorship and, yes, everyone's favorite topic, political correctness, here in a little bit. But you look at Bass Pro Shops NRA 500. At one time, you'd have on, what do you have? At one time down in Darlington, we had the Rebel 500 and the Southern 500. Now, in 2 weeks, it'll be the Southern 500. Okay? Sponsored by Bojangles, if you must know. They used to have 2 races in Darlington. It was part of the Winston Million. Winston! Wait a minute. Where has that gone? Yeah. And I mention this because this was one of the main featured Darlington. The Lady in Black. That was one of the tracks that everybody liked, down to one race. And I remember one time, I think it was, the old Rebel 500, and it changed its name to the Mall.com 500. And I was talking, actually, Steve Blevins, Performance Racing Network, about this. This was years ago. And because it was years ago, it was the Mall. There's no more Mall.com, okay? So consider that. The Mall.com 500. And it was around 2000, and I said, what about the identity? What about the identity of this racetrack and of this race? I mean, a Rebel 500, as you can say that's a politically incorrect name now or whatever. But I mean, if you wanted to change it and say we're going to be more with the times and change it to the Palmetto 500 here for Darlington, South Carolina, or something like that, the Pine Trees, 500. I've always thought there are more pine trees in South Carolina than palmettos, but I've spent most of my time in the Midlands, not the Low Countries, so, Regardless, situation comes out, if you're going to do something like that, okay, update it. But what is the mall.com 500? Where is that? Is that being run in Minneapolis near the Mall of America? I mean, what? Wait a minute. What's the mall.com 500? Wait a minute. I know of a speedway that used to be on the NASCAR circuit that was torn down for a shopping center. Should we really have this as a sponsor? It's like that. Where's the identity? And that's one of the reasons why I insist on calling ETSU's football stadium the stadium that should be named after John Robert Bell. Should be. They took a few pieces of silver from a local banker and named it after him. Regardless. Let's talk about this. Tomorrow it is the Bass Pro Shops NRA 500. It's going to be the last Bristol night race, at least for the time being, that's not in the playoff field. Instead, it's the last race of the regular season, with Clint Boyer trying to hold on to his 16th place position in the point standings amidst challenges from Daniel Suarez and Jimmy Johnson. I think there are too many drivers in the playoff field. I think 16 drivers are not worthy of competing for a championship when only 9 drivers have won a race this year. There's a legitimate chance that Ryan Newman, 15th in the point standings, will qualify for the postseason with only one top 5 finish. Eric Almirola will be in the playoff chase. He does have one top 5 finish. That's it. Should we have the playoffs at all? Do they weight 10 races greater than the other 26, thus the demise of NASCAR attendance? Now, I will say this, it reminds me, last day of the season in a pennant race, I can remember games like that, full houses, you knew, ahead of time, oh boy, and a lot of times even you will have dates in the baseball pennant races. It used to be this, they'd draw 50,000, but the anticipation was the pennant was going to be on the line last day of the seasons between first and second place teams. It is difficult to sell, just like this, a bunch of tickets. I get that. So if you have a one-game playoff or something, it's tough. It's probably a little bit easier now in the internet age, but yeah, I think there were, when Bobby Thompson did his home run in 1951 in the Polo Grounds, I think there were 32,000 people there. So there were plenty of empty seats, and the reason, they didn't know if there was going to be a Game 3 of the playoffs. Come on. I guess it was the last game of the regular season, the way they put it out, the National League did it, but they didn't know. The Dodgers won Game 2. If the Giants had won Game 2, there wouldn't have been a Game 3. Nobody, So there's a lot of, it's difficult to sell those games. I do get it, but there is a little bit of anticipation. If you can kind of see the pennant race, how it's going to go, and it's the last game of the year, oh yeah. And sometimes the pennant is clinched then, so you get like 50,000 people for lame duck games or so, but there is something about the last day of the year and your team is battling for a flag and there usually is a big crowd. You're usually going to have tremendous walk-up. I've got to see this, But do you have that with the last week of the NASCAR season, regular season? But I think one of the things that's going to get into the nation's eye on this one is if the National Rifle Association is going to continue to be a sponsor of NASCAR races, specifically the one in Bristol. Now, I'm not here to criticize or compliment the NRA. I'm trying to make the most objective statements that I can. It is, and I do wonder if, in the midst of the shootings in El Paso and Dayton and seemingly a new location every week, if the scope of political correctness will force NASCAR to eliminate the association with the NRA in the same manner they have tobacco advertising and the Confederate flag. perhaps part of the appeal of NASCAR is that it is a culture that often has been eschewed by the PC crowd. Hey, basketball's a city game. That's what the late Pete Axum, Newsweek, NFL, it wasn't, it was NFL Live, I guess they would call it NFL 84, NFL 85, depending on what the year was. But Pete Axum, remember him if you're of the era? He called basketball the city game. He was nail on the head right there. Well, NASCAR's a country boy sport. Yeah, it is. I mean, I know that they'll have their award ceremony in Manhattan or something like that, but no, it's a country boy sport. And I'm not here to say, do guns kill people or do people kill people? Or even if media attention and potential protests will demonize the NRA's sponsorship of the race. I'm here to theorize what's going to happen to it. Now, the Bristol people have told me on the show, look, this is the NRA sponsorship. We feel that it caters to our crowd. Absolutely, yes. But, and I wonder this, NASCAR is kind of slow to change such associations. I mean, I remember, I think it was 92, early 90s, reading a full-page ad, USA Today, Richard Petty penned it. Guess what? It was in support of tobacco advertising. 10 years later, there's no Winston Cup. But it took 10 years. And you could feel the winds of change in the early 90s. And I wonder, because we always had the sponsorship of the Cup. I mean, if you had the NASCAR Championship Cup, if it was called that, maybe it would be better than if it changed from the Winston Cup to the Sprint Cup to the Monster Energy Cup to who knows who the next sponsor will be, or why don't you, call it the, I don't know, Richard Petty Cup or something like that. Why don't you? Give it identity. Look, it comes down to this. If the existing sponsors of NASCAR feel they don't want to associate themselves with the NRA, then their sponsorship's probably going to be dissolved. If there is potential for the NRA to increase other potential sponsorship, however, due to, let's say, their attraction to that sponsorship that has that country boy attraction, much like Bass Pro Shops do, then sponsorship from the NRA, that'll continue. And by the way, nobody knows how to lobby like the NRA. But I want to ask you this. Has sponsorship of NASCAR races run its course? Because I mentioned this at the start of the commentary, Marky's monologue. I mean, a Bass Pro Shops NRA 500 doesn't save Bristol, like I said. Volunteer 500 basically does. And it's been a million years since it's been the Volunteer 500. Sponsorship of races come and go. I mentioned that before. By now, a race is usually referred to by its track. I almost always do. Not its sponsor. It's the night race in Bristol. And the races with a real identity are the Daytona 500 and the Brickyard 400. I think Pennzoil has had a sponsorship with the Brickyard 400, but still. Those are the ones, because you remember this. Could there be an excess of sponsorship? It seems odd to ask that in this day and age. I mean, NASCAR needs all the money it can get, right? But the sole sponsor will certainly get more attention, pay more than a multitude of sponsors. I mean, I'm going to tell you, I've been part of it. The anniversary when Bill Mazeroski hits his home run to beat the Yankees in 1960 World Series. There's actually an event. People get at the old spot of Forbes Field near where it was, and they bring out a radio recording, and everybody listens to the broadcast. Actually, they talk among themselves while the broadcast goes around, and then they cheer when Mazeroski hits his home run. I know that the ad before the bottom of the ninth inning in the seventh game of the World Series radio broadcast was for the Corvair. Now, how do I remember that? Because it's the only ad they had between the inning. Yeah, the Chevrolet Corvair, 1960. Okay? But I mean, even to this day, then there's some sort of cachet that Chevy and the Corvair have, because I know that that was the ad right there. If you have 4 ads between innings. You're not going to remember. No. You're not going to remember what those, you're not going to remember it. You're not going to remember them. So I think the future of the sport might be one of contraction. Making every car on the track a potential winner, making every race an event, making every sponsor get its just attention. Could happen with the NRA. Could not. We'll just have to wait and see. Tri-City Sports Now, I'm Marky Billson, right rev of speed. Jerry Bonkowski joining me to begin the next hour, and then bottom of the next hour, Josh Brown talking about the first place Atlanta Braves. He hosts a podcast with Ken Hendricks called Knockahoma Nation. He used to cover the Rome Braves as well. It's Tri-City Sports Now, JetBroadcasting.live, 1420 WEMB Sports Radio.
With Jim and Trav, we're talking early season deer hunting and